time, but I think it just goes back. Most of us don't know how to handle conflict. Most of us didn't have it modeled for us growing up, or if we did, we thought, oh my gosh, fighting scares us. We blame the other person, trying to put all the responsibility on them, and then defensive. Once we say something in a way that's like probably accusatory, something like that, and our spouse gets defensive, well, then the conversation is probably pretty much over then anyway.
When we try our best to avoid conflict, we're not really equipping ourselves with the skills to handle it well. Are you sick of the conflict cycle? We all probably know plenty of ineffective ways to handle conflict. It's unproductive, things never get resolved, and both spouses get hurt in the process. Today's topic is one of the most common things we hear about from couples, and Dr. Kim is going to share a path to de-escalate, fight fair, and resolve conflict better in your marriage. So, Dr. Kim, let's get fighting right.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are some of the ineffective ways that you see couples or individuals handle conflict?
Oh, I think there's a lot, and we'll just list a few of them that I see are prevalent all the time. But I think it just goes back. Most of us don't know how to handle conflict. You and I talking before we went live of how most of us didn't have it modeled for us growing up, or if we did, we thought, oh my gosh, fighting scares us. And so all those kind of things. And so I think a lot of the ineffective ways probably come out of that. We don't know what to do. So we're trying to figure it out on your own. So I think sometimes we just avoid it. There's some couples that just avoid it. They never do issues. Usually if I have a couple come in, which happens very rarely, say they don't fight much or fight, usually we find out they're just not dealing with the issues. And so then it's coming out sideways, the way they treat each other or act each other, not addressing the real issue, but all those feelings and emotions are coming out somewhere. So avoidance, I think, is way. I think another way is that Nancy and I went through is just kind of winning at all cost, wanting to win that and not really focusing on the issue as much as the argument and winning that. And I think I see couples do that. And I think one of the things that we do that just really irritates our spouses when we use the words like always or never, just absolutes that we use. And I think that just puts a barrier up then, because most of us never, always, or never do something. We're doing it some, and maybe to the spouse it feels like it's always or never, but it probably isn't. Another thing I think that is when we bring up past issues. So you're dealing one thing, and then you start, because by the time we get into marriage, not too far, we've got an arsenal of things we can throw out. And if we haven't dealt with them and forgiven them and moved on. And so I think it's easy to bring up the past, and it's like if your spouse is saying, well, you did this and that and that, and then all of a sudden we go, well, remember when you did this? And so then so that doesn't handle conflict very well. We blame the other person, trying to put all the responsibility on them, and then defensive. Once we say something in a way that's like probably accusatory, something like that, and our spouse gets defensive, well, then the conversation is probably pretty much over then anyway, because then all of a sudden you're defending yourself and you're lashing out, and sudden things escalate. So I think a lot of those, there's probably other ways, but those are ones I see people deal with a lot. And I think it's just because we don't know how to deal with it. And so we find something, and probably in some ways those work short term. If you're trying to win and your spouse gives up and you think, oh, well, that's good, I won.
Right.
But at some point you're going to realize, no, our marriage didn't win. I'm winning and marriage isn't. Or if you're avoiding it, eventually things are going to explode. It's got to come out sometime. We just can't keep stuffing it down. So I think sometimes those ineffective ways, we think they're working for a while, and then they realize, okay, they're not working either.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a real rude awakening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, gosh, you kind of covered the whole gamut there. There's something for everybody, because I think you're right. Like if we even saw conflict modeled well, I'm thinking of a young person I spoke to recently who said, well, I've seen this way of handling it. I don't want to do that. I've seen this way of handling it. I don't want to do that. And basically they said, I've never seen a relationship that I'm willing to model after. And it's not that they were terrible. This person just was fixated on, I think I could do it even better. But the
Yeah,
reality is that that's just, it's going to take trial and error at best. It's going to take some learning. So I think it's difficult because
absolutely.
when we avoid it, when we try our best to avoid conflict, we're not really equipping ourselves with the skills to handle it well, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that was a thing thinking back in the early probably year or 2 of our marriage
Hmm.
that we would avoid it. We'd be mad at each other and we wouldn't speak to each other for 2 or 3 days, and then we kinda
Hmm.
missed each other and would start acting like everything was okay again until
Yeah.
something happened again, and so we had this cycle,
Hmm.
and it was just so destructive over time.
Hmm.
We'd be down and up and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and we weren't solving anything at all, and so
Hmm.
that continued to go until we realized we got to figure out something here.
Yeah.
This is not working.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. Referring back to the early days of marriage, it reminds me of, we had this problem before marriage that did carry into our early marriage where we, for some reason, thought we could figure out all the issues and then never have to argue again.
What a great idea.
Yeah, it's really smart. No, I don't know why we just thought, yeah, we got to hash this out, hash that out, and then we'll just be good. And
Yeah.
it's funny. It's so funny now. I can't even say it without laughing because it's so naive. Like, I don't know why we would think that that would be the case, but the issues we saw in front of us then, we thought were going to be the only issues we ever dealt with. So we didn't work on our conflict solving. We just tried to win at all costs so we could get it
Yeah.
over with and move on. But then we never got the skills to handle conflict well.
Yeah. It's interesting how we try to deal with things
Yes.
sometimes. And I think early marriage, you're naive
Hmm.
and I can remember at one point thinking, well, we're both Christians. Christians couples never fight, and that
Right.
was, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Well.
so, and all this kind of stuff that goes through our minds, and then we get into it, and
Hmm.
I think a lot of it is just we try to survive through it. We don't know what to do,
Yeah.
and we don't want to. Most of us don't want to get a divorce, but it's like this is not fun, and this is not
Yeah.
working. But we have no idea what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. When I love one thing, you've said this a lot to premarital couples. You have said that gaining the skill of resolution is one of the best things you can do as a couple for your marriage because then you don't have to be afraid of it. You don't have to worry about handling stuff.
Absolutely, it is. I tell couples that all the time when we're.
Hmm.
I've got a couple couples we're going through premarital right now, and that's what I tell them in the conflict. If you can figure out how to do conflict, and of course,
Hmm.
give them tools and work on it. Yeah, because then if something comes up, it's like, hey, we need to deal with this,
Hmm.
and your spouse doesn't go hide under the bed.
Yes.
They're going, yeah, we can do with this. We can do it.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's so good. So that's where we're going today, and I love this for our listeners to have that confidence that conflict is not something to run and hide from. It's something that actually can end up bringing you together, like bringing close together.
Yeah, because I think there's this when we resolve something together, there's a
Hmm.
celebration there. It's like, well,
Yes.
we did this,
Yes.
and we neither one of us is bleeding or
Yeah.
just we're
Yeah.
we're doing really good. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So that's what we were going after.